Hello and welcome to What Bike Next, the series in which Simon Hargreaves and I go head to head to try and find our BikeSocial member their very next bike. And you never know, we could be doing the same for you. We say thank you once again to Pirelli for helping us out make these video series. So we are at the Donington Park venue of the Superbike Factory, and we're going to be trying to help Marc Broome, our BikeSocial member, find his next bike. And here he is, Marc.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for coming along. Thanks for being part of the process. So first things first, let's get to know you a bit more. Where are you from, what do you do, and tell us a bit about your biking history, perhaps.
So I'm Marc. I'm a civil servant. I live just on the outskirts of Blackpool. I've been riding bikes for about 15 years now, on and off. I sort of started at 16, various bikes up until the age of about 21. And then I moved away from bikes for a little bit. Life got in the way, as it does sometimes. But I returned to biking about 10 years ago now. So yeah, I've been riding constantly for the last 10 years or so.
What have you got in your garage?
So I currently have an 06 Fireblade. I've had that just over 4 years now. Absolutely love it. You know, I've spent quite a bit of time changing a few things here and there. Got the bike just how I want it now, really, I suppose.
What do you do with it? Are you a weekend rider?
Primarily, yes. So just for leisure rides. I occasionally go over to the Isle of Man. I'm booked to go again in early May. And I occasionally use it for commuting as well. I go into the office a couple of days a week. You know, I've got the car as an option, but sometimes if it's nice, I like to use the bike for that commute. Not so much touring and things like that. It tends to be shorter, fun rides.
So you sound you're quite happy with the Fireblade. So what bike are you looking for? Are you looking to replace it, or?
No. The Fireblade is definitely staying.
That's a keeper.
It is a keeper.
Okay.
But I do like to ride all year round. And the problem with the winter is I enjoy the riding, but you can spend an hour riding and then 3 hours cleaning the bike afterwards.
Absolutely, yeah.
So sometimes that puts me off a little bit because I'm sort of 50-50. I want to go for a ride, but I don't want all the aggravation when I get back of trying to keep the bike immaculate. So really what I'm looking for is a second bike that...
Okay.
that I'm perhaps a little bit less precious about than the Fireblade. So happy to go out in all weathers, take it out, but not worry too much about keeping it immaculate, if that makes sense.
Can we call it a winter hack? Are we allowed to call it that word? Or is it
can.
more than that?
Well, it's a strange one, really. I want to love the bike,
Yeah.
but not love the bike,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. I want to love riding it, but not to the point where I don't want to ride it because I don't want to...
So you want it to be good, but not too good?
Yes.
That's a tricky challenge, isn't it? I think a lot of people face the same problem. You know, I guess you browse the classifieds and you find the bike that you want, and then you go and find the best one, and then you go, it's too good to ride in the winter. So we're looking for something in between.
Absolutely. So it is quite a challenge, and I accept that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What sort of requirements have you got then for it? What size? What sort of any particular do's and don'ts?
Obviously, coming from the Fireblade, I want something that's still got a reasonable amount of power.
Okay.
Not necessarily as much as the Fireblade has. Sometimes greasy roads in winter, it can almost be a little bit too much. But I still want to be able to have lots of fun on it. You know, if I need to overtake, I need to have the power to be able to do that. So go out and have some fun. Occasionally you do get a nice day in winter, so have a bit of fun in the corners. But also that ability to maybe put a top box on it, use it to go to work as well. It really needs to be a jack of all trades almost.
Right. So there's no limitations in terms of style of bike, for example?
No, not really. I think traditionally I've always had fully fared sports touring type of bikes, but I'm open to something different or staying similar with the fully fared type of bike. So open-minded, really.
I guess the key question is, how much have you got to spend?
Well, maximum I would like to spend is £3,000. So I'm thinking in the sort of 2,000 to 3,000 sort of bracket. And again, it comes back to the point I made earlier. If I start to spend more than that, I might...
You're going to love it a bit too much.
Yeah, exactly. So it's finding that balance.
All right.
Right. Okay.
So we're building up a bit of a picture here. It's good because you're sort of narrow-ish, but it's still wide enough for us to have a really, really good look around here at the Superbike Factory. What do you reckon, Simon? We've got enough to go on?
I think we've got enough to go on, and we've got enough bikes to look at as well. So I think we should get looking and see what we can find.
Right. Let's see if we can find Marc his next bike. Marc's going to test ride 3 used bikes we think might suit him best. One chosen by me, one chosen by Simon, and then a mystery bike selected by Superbike Factory's sales expert, Aude Moreau. Then at the end, we're going to find out which bike Marc prefers. And hopefully we'll have answered his question, what bike next? Marc will be testing our 3 bike choices on the What Bike Next test route. While braving the chilly conditions in an hour-long loop, Marc will take in the twisty roads of South Derbyshire, a mixture of A's and B's, in town and out. Plenty of riding for Marc to get a feel for his next bike.
So then, Marc, should we have a look at your first bike?
Yes, please.
It's been an exhaustive process selecting this. Are you excited?
I'm very excited, yes.
So am I. I want to see your reaction. Should we get the cover off?
Yeah, sounds good.
Ta-da!
Okay.
What do you think?
Phaser.
It is
Yamaha.
indeed. FZS 1000. So it's 2004 model, this one.
Okay.
They've got it up at £2,991.
Right.
So it's right at the top end of your budget.
Okay.
25,000 miles. Have you ever thought about a Phaser before?
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of the bikes that, you know, had semi-crossed my mind, I suppose. I've never ridden one.
You've never discounted it for...
I've certainly never discounted it. You know, when I think about my brief, you know, looking at it, it fits the brief.
It certainly does, yeah. 140 odd horsepower, so it's got plenty of go in it.
It's not lacking.
But also, I mean, they're really, really great to ride. It's really comfy, it's really easy to get on, it's really convenient. Top box is not a problem. Obviously there isn't one, but that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a little bit too good to be a full-on winter hack, but as usual, I'm hoping you'll be seduced by the performance.
Yes.
Because they are good fun to ride.
There is genuine excitement, I think, to actually get out and ride it. I don't always think the Phaser's the prettiest looking thing, but...
How dare you? It's a gorgeous bike.
Well, yeah, I know. But when you sat on a bike riding it, you're not looking at it, are you?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
and it's not quite naked. You've got a half fairing.
Yes. I quite like that compromise, actually, to be perfectly honest, because it is, you know, it is a little bit different. It's not fully faired, but you still have got the little bit of protection, I suppose, from that. But I'd probably be a bit unfair when I said not the prettiest looking bikes, because actually, certainly from here, it does look, it looks the business, I think.
Should we go for a ride?
Oh, sounds good, please.
Okay, let's go.
Well, let's see if bike number 1 can win Marc over, or will that engine be too similar to his Fireblade?
It sounds like Marc is warming up to the idea of the Phaser Thou, and if he's not convinced by its looks, maybe the 140 horsepower XR1 motor might do the trick. It's a big, smooth, carbureted lump of a thing, loads of mid-range and top end, and it's reliable, certainly at a mere 25,000 miles old. The chassis is a bit on the soft side, which is fine if you want an easygoing, undemanding daily commute in all weathers. It's not going to rattle your fillings out over potholes. And the riding position is perfect for batting backwards and forwards to work. It's relatively relaxed, it's got a hint of forward lean to feel active and engaged. Fitting a top box would be a doddle, so I reckon the Phaser Thou is just the thing for making Marc's commute, well, a bit more spicy if he wants to dip into the Yamaha's performance, or a bit more painless if he just wants to sit back and laze about.
So Marc, you've just come back from a ride then on the mighty Phaser 1000. What are your first impressions?
Yeah, it was a really pleasant surprise, actually, riding the bike, and a lot better than I perhaps first expected.
Oh, okay.
Handlebars felt quite high, which, you know, compared to I was riding the Fireblade just a few days ago, so I suppose it was inevitable that it was going to feel like a different riding position.
Yeah.
And it almost felt a little bit like I couldn't quite tell how much grip there was at the front end as a result of that. But I think that's something I'd probably just get used to.
Yeah.
In terms of the rest of the bike, I mean, the engine, fantastically powerful. It had grunt from the very off, you know, higher up the rev range, lots of power. Brakes, I mean, the brakes felt almost better than they do on the Fireblade, I've got to be honest. They felt really strong, but not too strong, not too sharp. It just felt really, really nice, actually.
The brakes are good because where you're sitting more upright, when you brake, it tends to put the weight of the bike down really force it down. So these things do stop pretty well.
Yeah, it felt really strong in that department. Bike felt quite solid, quite planted. Obviously the roads are a little bit greasy today, and you know it's moving around a little bit, but you know it never felt out of control at any time on the bike. It just felt really solid and comfortable to ride. Foot pegs felt like they were in a really nice place.
So we were looking for things like, so it was a winter hack basically, and we were looking at things like the riding position, the convenience of riding the bike, the whole general kind of flavour of it. Was that something you think you could really get into?
Yeah, I think I definitely could. I think it does feel like it could be a jack of all trades bike, genuine. I think certainly once I'd got used to it a little bit more, you could really hustle it along, you know, if the weather allowed that. But at the same time, I felt I could just kick back and relax and just enjoy riding it.
Yeah.
You know, if I just wanted to commute and go to work or nip to the shops. Yeah, it's a real do-it-all motorbike.
Suspension, the ride, the weight of the thing, was that?
Yeah, it's the way, you know, moving it around at low speed. You know, you're conscious it's a large motorcycle, but it didn't feel unwieldy or anything like that. The seat felt like it was a nice height. No issues getting both feet on the ground.
Ooh.
Is it not too similar to the Fireblade in terms of performance, in terms of engine character? Obviously, you've got the short little sporty levers here, which are unnecessary on this side of the bike, but...
There is a familiarity.
Yeah.
You know, the engine does feel quite similar, actually, I would suggest. But whether that's a bad thing or not, I don't really know. It's different enough, I think, that, you know, the riding position is enough of a difference. It felt a little bit more relaxed in that respect. So it ticks a lot of the boxes.
Let me show you something that's going to tick all the boxes. Are you ready for bike number 2? If you think this is good, you just wait. But what if Mark doesn't want a 1000cc bike? On to bike number 2. Mark, here we are, bike number 2. So this is my choice. Before I unveil it, there's 4 things I want to tell you.
Okay.
First one is there's an appendage here, and it's fairly obvious what it is, but I think that's a good thing, considering your checklist, your criteria.
100%.
Secondly, it's got an alarm, so if we undo it, if we take the cover off and it starts bleeping at you, don't worry, we can soon turn it off. Thirdly, one owner from new, this. One owner from new. And fourth, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, considering you sort of, you know, you want to love it, but not that much. And it's only done 2,600 miles.
Really?
So, I just wanted to plant that seed before we unveil. Do you want to grab the back?
Yeah.
I'll grab the front and we'll hopefully not set off the immobiliser. And there we go. Folded the mirrors in to try and get the cover on as well. Here we are, I'm still faffing. You've done your end. Ta-da, just pop that down. So, I know Simon chose you a Yamaha Phaser, Fed, but this is obviously the smaller one, the FZ6.
Right, okay.
Tell me.
I feel like I've been a bit unfair to Phasers in terms of the looks, and you know, I think I've probably never looked at one properly close up, and I think now I am doing, it's better than what I thought in my head, if I'm honest.
Well, that's a good sign.
So that's very much a good sign. I mean, the things you said about the mileage and the one owner, that's quite incredible for a bike that's the same age as my Fireblade, actually.
Yeah, 2006, yeah. So yeah, one owner from new, 2,600 miles. It's a shade over your budget. It's 3,187.
Okay.
But of course, that's the compromise there is A, you've already got top box fitted.
Absolutely.
B, it's got the one owner from me, the mileage. And you're talking about looks. Come and have a look at it from the front. I think it looks smart from the front, at least. It's kind of got that R1 design, really, with the headlights. It's got obviously got the retuned R6 engine, 600cc, makes just under 100 brake horse. Well, that's a claim anyway.
Okay.
It's got all the keys, which is quite important on a Phaser. So it's got the red master key that's still here in case you lose one of them. It's got the immobiliser. It's got data tool marking. You've got your Givey box key on there as well.
And the top box, you know, is a huge bonus because that's absolutely something that I'm looking to get, and it looks a good size top box as well. Sometimes they're very small.
I think you'll be able to get 2 full-size helmets in case you wanted to.
It's getting a laptop in there, a Surface Pro, and you know, change your clothes for work. That's the key, and that looks plenty big enough. I like just noticed twin exhaust actually on the back. That looks quite nice. Underseat exhaust again, like my Fireblade actually. You know, there's some similarities there.
Well, again, the engine's really versatile. Brakes are good. It's going to be sporty enough, I think, for the weekend stuff. But it's got the practicality and the versatility for everything else you wanted on your checklist.
Centre stand as well.
Yeah, it's important. Actually, it's a really good thing to point out. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, fancy a ride?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. Will my bike win him over? Or is it a little underpowered? Must admit, I thought I had this in the bag with that array of trump cards like the fitted top box, its security, low mileage, especially because Marc was looking for something to use as a workhorse and not necessarily to love. There's also a tiny amount of negotiation away from being within budget, but then again that big phaser makes a really good amount of power and all in the right places too. Nah, Marc will see the smaller version as the ideal solution to his needs. This Yamaha is easier to manoeuvre, it's got a brilliant motor, and its tremendous versatility will surely win him over. The 795mm seat height will suit Marc, and he'll easily get 200 miles per tank. Yep, I can just see him heading back off to Blackpool on this FZ6 as one happy civil servant. How was it for you, Marc? You freshened off the second phaser of the day. All right, it's got less power, but less owners, less miles, more top box.
Yes, indeed.
More comfort, perhaps. Nice screen, pleasant dash, more alarms.
I suppose there's inevitable comparisons, having ridden the 1000cc version earlier today,
Sure.
and then coming on to the 600. So it feels similar in some ways, but almost a little bit less in most areas. So I mean, the engine first and foremost, felt quite a revvy engine. Didn't perhaps have the grunt that the 1000cc had earlier. It felt like there was plenty of power there, but you had to go looking for it a little bit more. We mentioned the gauge. I found the rev counter a little bit, it just wasn't quite as immediately visible. It felt to a certain degree. Again, perhaps something I would get used to. Brakes, interestingly, didn't feel as strong as they did on the 1000cc. They didn't quite have the same level of bite. They were fine, there was nothing wrong with them, but perhaps just wanted a little bit more. And the handling just didn't feel quite as solid or quite as planted as the 1000. But I suppose you make that inevitable comparison to the bike I'd ridden prior to this one, just didn't feel quite as good a package.
Interesting with the calipers, you talk about the brakes, because there's a second generation of FZ6 which came with the blue spot calipers that you get on the Phaser Thou.
The S2 model,
S2 model, that's it, yeah. Which I think was a few years after this. So that and that R6 engine, not that I'm trying to convince you, but it is a revvy unit. That was one of the criticisms aimed at the bike when it was launched. That engine is kind of not really suited to this sort of role.
Yeah, I think if you were in the mood for this engine, it'd be really, really good. But I suppose winter riding, when sometimes you don't want to be right at the top end of the rev range, you just want to sit back a little bit. It perhaps just felt a bit lacking in power, even though I know it's there.
Yeah. So you want enough torque to kind of go for that overtake and.
Yes, without needing to
stick.
drop down 2 gears, and beforehand, you just want that instant sort of go, and it just felt a little bit lacking in that respect, I think.
It's quite a smooth engine though, isn't it? It's really...
It is, but then I don't know if that almost worked against it as well, because it was so smooth and it just felt like it was taking a long time
to build up the revs.
Build.
Yeah.
It was, and you could see the speedo climbing. It just didn't give that immediacy that, perhaps the other bike did.
How do you feel about the comfort of the bike though, the size of the bike? And
again, to just sort of turn it around and things like that, it was very, very comfortable in that respect. It felt like it was a nice position. I could easily do 100 miles on this and not bat an eyelid. And it has got some great benefits. The dash is a little bit more modern, perhaps looks slightly more stylish, I guess, on the front. The top box is a huge benefit. It's not a bad bike by any stretch of the imagination.
before I pack up and go home, let's go and have a look at that mystery bike, shall we?
Yeah, let's find out what it is.
Okay, on to bike number 3, and this is the mystery bike chosen by Superbike Factory's sales expert, Aude Moreau. So let's see what she had to say about what bike she thinks Marc might like next.
My name is Aude. I've worked here since the opening, almost 2 years ago now. Well, it's a reliable engine. It's an inline 4, easy to maintain, cheap to run as well. He wanted an all-weather bike for a commute. With a rainy weather, a slippery surface, it's not going to go crazy if you don't want to, but if you want to go on a weekend, on a nicer weather, you can have the sporty attitude as well. I've never owned one of these myself, but I know a lot of people who did. I'm actually French, like you can hear, and it's very popular in France. And they even made some racing just for this bike. So yeah, it's a pretty good one. So I think that's a good choice, and he's gonna love it.
Mark, bike number 3 is mystery bike time, and this has been selected by Ord from Superbike Factory. It's as much of a mystery it is for us as it is for you, so he's clearly not got a top box, this one, but shall we have a go? Shall we have a see what's under the covers? Dun, da, da.
Blimey.
A Honda Hornet with a purple checkerboard effect. Ah, and cheat sheet.
And a cheat sheet, what have we got? Honda CB600F Hornet. We said it's £2,591, 2003. It's got 12,000 miles on it. It's had 4 owners. And it says here it makes 97 horsepower. Okay. We say don't. It's a bit less than that.
Is that a claim or is that?
Yes, that's a claim. It might be a little bit less at the back wheel. Well, it's quite fetching. But it's, what is that, violet?
Different.
Checks on it. And
Yeah.
yeah, and a custom
So
seat.
unfaired.
Well, that's an interesting choice, isn't it?
It looks standard, doesn't it? Apart from
It looks standard. Yeah, I think that's
the lilac
probably...
and the seat.
I mean, I must admit, I do really, really like the look of the Hornet. You know, it's a bike I've always thought, I mean, I've never ridden a naked bike, so I might get on it and think, well, I don't like this, but just the look of it and the feel of it.
Well, it's good to be open-minded about these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, they're good things. Obviously, there was a race series for Hornets.
Yes, absolutely. Is this a 16-inch?
This is a 17-inch front wheel.
Right,
so it's a standard one 2070, so that's good. Lots of spares available because of the race series.
Yeah.
There's tons of parts. But I mean, it looks... The other thing is that motor is unbreakable.
Yes,
That's
of course.
You're never going to have a problem. And again, you know, in terms of like you're saying, use the word winter hack, it sort of fits the bill in that it's obviously pre-loved.
But it's like you say, the fact I know there was a very popular race series, wasn't there, for these? So they're clearly a bike that handles well. If you want to have that little bit of fun with it, it's got it.
Yeah. It's great fun on a track day.
Well, that's it, you know, and if I decide to have a go at sort of tinkering, oil and filter change and things like that, then it's half the time, isn't it? Because you're not taking fair enough to get to the engine as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you want to go for a ride?
Absolutely, I do, yeah, absolutely.
Take it out.
Let's see if bike number 3 is at Mark Street, or perhaps that lilac paintwork will put him off.
Well, that's a bit of a surprise. Mark seemed pretty enthusiastic about the Hornet. I suppose I shouldn't be too surprised. He's already got a Honda in his garage. The Hornet would be a nice addition alongside his Fireblade. So this Hornet is a 2003 bike, which means it has the all-important 17-inch front wheel. The first model in 1998 had a 16-inch front. It's the same engine though. It's completely bomb-proof CBR 600 unit, which will effectively run until there's no more petrol left. And the 600 Hornet is one of those really basic no-frills bikes that just does everything really, really well. It's light, it's flickable, it's sweet steering, it's easy to maintain, it will run forever, you can fit loads of luggage, and it's got decent performance. You have to rev it a bit, and they can sound mechanically noisy when they're spinning, and the gearbox isn't the smoothest. But as an all-year, all-rounder, fair play to Ord, the Hornet will take some beating.
Right then, Mark, last ride of the day. How did you get on with the Honda Hornet?
I loved it.
Ooh.
I just, it's hard to put into words really, I suppose. It felt like I was a child riding a BMX again almost, but without having to pedal, which is a bizarre way to describe it, I know, but it felt like so much fun to ride. So I just didn't want the test ride to end. You know, I was hoping you were going to take a wrong turn somewhere and it was going to continue on the test ride. It's almost difficult to pinpoint why. The brakes, they weren't as sharp as perhaps they were on the Phaser, but they were strong enough.
Yeah.
The engine was interesting. I mean, I'm conscious it's only a 600. It did feel quite revvy, but it just felt like it had a bit more guts to it than perhaps the Phaser 600 had.
I bet this is a lighter bike.
Yeah.
It felt light. I mean, the handlebars are obviously quite wide, I suppose, again, compared to what I'm used to, and it took the slightest nudge on the bars and the bike just dropped into a corner really quite quickly. But it just put such a grin on my face.
Wow.
This is probably the most fun I've had on a motorbike since I was in the Isle of Man last summer. It was just...
What a tremendous reaction.
That is quite an accolade, isn't it? I mean, who would have thought? A humble Honda Hornet.
Yeah.
The original Hornet.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't get too deep into it now, but the riding position, I mean, because that does look like a low seat. I mean, how from there to there, there's not a great deal of distance, but then you're used to a sports bike, maybe that.
Yeah, and again, it did feel alien. I mean, the one thing I was very conscious of was the wind blast on it. And it helped make the bike feel quicker than it actually was. It felt like you were going really, really fast. You look at the speedo and it perhaps wasn't quite as fast as what you thought. But again, that just felt like a real positive. It just felt like you could have so much fun at road legal speeds, which this time of year when the roads aren't great, that's what you want.
Mark, should we go and have a cup of tea and talk about all 3 bikes together?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, get out of your leathers as well, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
Mark, we've thawed out a bit now. You've got your brew. You've had 3 back-to-back rides. It's been quite an intense day, I would imagine. So should we talk about the bikes one by one?
Yeah,
Mark,
let's go for it. Start at the beginning.
Start with the big phaser. Where are you at?
Yeah, still pleasantly surprised by the big phaser, I've got to be honest. I think I said, you know, when I first saw it this morning, not that taken by the looks of the bike, perhaps necessarily. All of that seemed to sort of melt away once I actually got on it. The bike felt right in so many areas. I mean, the engine was one of the standout things, really. Just so much grunt. It was so easy. Off the line, mid-range, higher up the range. It just had power. It felt fantastic in that respect. The brakes were the other real standout thing from that particular bike as well. So powerful, but easy to use at the same time. It really felt like you could stop in a hurry on that if you needed to. Did take some getting used to the handlebars being as high as what they were. That's nothing to do with the bike. It's just getting used to a slightly different style of bike. But it felt planted. You know, handling wise, I think once I'd got used to it a little bit, I could probably hustle that bike along at a fair rate.
When you say you were pleasantly surprised, because I thought at the time, I was thinking, well, do you have like a preconception of the phaser? Did you think it was something that it turned out not to be, or?
I think I did. I think I've always been aware that the phaser's a well-regarded motorcycle. And,
yeah.
You know, you tend to read very positive things about it, but I was perhaps concerned it was going to be a little bit boring. As I say, when I first look at it, I don't immediately fall in love with it as you do perhaps with some bikes. So that puts you off a little bit.
Yeah.
But as I say, all that just disappeared as soon as I started riding it.
When that cover came off, I was looking for your reaction, and it was, you must be very good at poker because you didn't really show much. Because of course you've been used to your inline 4, your 1000cc, plenty of power. Just a slightly different riding style and a different power delivery. So it's, I guess, familiarity helped with that and with understanding how the bike's engine character would work.
Yeah, it did. As I say, literally within a few hundred yards of riding the bike, it felt like I'd ridden the bike many times previously, if that makes sense. It wasn't like it was apart from the bars, as I keep coming back to, but everything else just felt a bit of familiarity to it.
Moving on, speaking of phasers, you had I chose the FZ6, so again, fared, smaller physically, dynamically. It was a younger bike. I've sold it to you already in terms of its, one owner from new, low mileage, blah, blah, blah. But again, you kind of stepped off that and weren't particularly wowed, and I was surprised. I thought you'd be.
It was probably a little bit unfair on the 6, to be fair, having come straight from the Thou, and as I say, having quite enjoyed that ride actually with the grunt of the engine and the brakes and all the rest of it, and it felt very similar to that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, the engine was just a bit less powerful. The brakes were a little bit less powerful. The handling wasn't quite as planted. It was okay, but it just felt not quite as solid. I didn't have quite the same level of confidence going into the bends and so on and so forth. The engine, the power was there, but you needed to work to get to it. And on a red hot summer's day, when you can chase the red line a little bit, perhaps, it's perhaps what you would want. But in these types of conditions, which really, it's these types of conditions that I'm looking for a bike for.
Yeah.
You just had to try a little bit too hard, it felt sometimes.
You felt safe enough on it though, did you?
Oh yeah, I did. Again, I almost feel bad being critical of the bike because it is a good bike, and for some people it would make an excellent choice. It absolutely would. I can't be too critical of it. It just didn't do enough for me for what I was actually looking for. Great things on it. The top box on it was a really big top box. That was absolutely fantastic. And as you say, it was a little bit newer than the 1000. You know, it had the newer dash on it and so on and so forth. So it definitely had some things going for it. The underseat exhaust as well. I'm still not saying it's the prettiest bike, you know, in the showroom, but it's okay.
So that sort of brings us on then to the mystery bike, which absolutely floored me, because when we unveiled it, I was thinking, what have they done? What has Ord come up with here? This is a really left field choice. Yeah, I thought, you know, Mark's never going to go for this.
Well, it looked like we were both as surprised as each other, I think, on that one. I was
like, okay, they've dropped a clanger there. Tell us, what was it about the bike when you first got on it? Did it fit you instantly? Is it the engine? Is it the...
It felt right before we'd even got out of the car park. You know, the clutch just felt right and the gears felt right. And maybe there's a Honda familiarity. I don't know, perhaps. Maybe there's a little bit of bias there that I didn't... Yeah, perhaps, that I didn't realise I had.
I did notice it was the hardest one to start.
Yes, we'll put that down to user error. I'm not really sure. But,
right, I was thinking, this isn't the best start, is it?
No.
You can't even get it going. But.
No, but once it was going, I mean, I do find it hard to put into words. It was just so much fun.
Let's talk about the engine character. So, because you with the FZ6, you've got an inline 4 600cc, and with this is an inline 4 600cc. So how were they different?
It felt like the Hornet had a lot more grunt lower down. It didn't have the grunt of the 1000. It would be silly of me to suggest that it did, perhaps, but it had plenty of grunt. You could ride it without being up near the rev limiter.
So a better spread of power.
Absolutely a better spread of power, and it felt like the engine had character, which is perhaps a strange thing to say for an engine that's been around as long as that particular engine has. But maybe there's a reason it's been around that long. It was just a very, very good engine and a great bike to ride in that respect.
Strong, versatile.
Yeah, and the steering, the agility of the thing. I mean, I was sort of watching you in the mirrors, and you seem to be, I don't know, you look comfortable. It was a good bit of riding. You look comfortable on all the bikes. You look perfectly happy on all of them. It was hard to tell just watching you and the speeds that we were doing, which one was the one that was really floating your boat. So I wouldn't have guessed it was the Hornet.
Again, it still felt a little bit alien. I need to remind myself that I'm coming from the Farblade, which is a different type of bike. So there's no fairing on it. It's naked. The bars are very wide, so it turned incredibly quick. It felt probably because the bars are so wide and a little bit of pressure in it, and it was falling straight into a bend. But it wasn't scary. You kind of knew. You very quickly got used to it, and you knew what it was going to do. And just I can imagine riding it on roads that I'm familiar with, roads back home, and just having so much fun.
You talked about the aesthetics of the first couple of bikes, and it's been on the front of your mind all day. But what was it about the sort of the naked CB600 that...
It was the lilac patches, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the lilac patches. I'm still a little unsure about those, if I'm honest. But it looks... It's strange to say it's a good-looking bike, because in lots of ways it almost isn't. There's no fairing on it, and that's alien concept for me. It really is, having no bodywork whatsoever. But it just works somehow. The high-level exhaust pipe, the engine jutting out from the frame. It just, to look at. For me, it was the best bike to look at. It was the best bike to ride. So I've not had that much fun on a bike in a long, long time. It was...
There's a smile in his eyes, isn't there?
I can almost, you always start to feel a bit of emotion when you talk about it. It's almost like, but it's biking's about having fun, isn't it? That's okay. I will use it for commuting sometimes, and I think it will do that job absolutely fine, without any hassle whatsoever. But fundamentally, I ride for fun, and in conditions like today, which are it's a bit wet, it's a bit dry, it's a bit greasy, it's a bit salty. A bike like that would just put so much of a smile on my face. It was unbelievable.
Is there any bike that we missed out? Because there's one bike in particular that's probably not quite, it's still a bit outside of your price bracket, but there's one bike in particular that I'm now thinking you should try before you buy anything else. And I'm thinking 675 Street Triple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have, funnily enough, I did ride one of those a few years ago. I did one of the knee-down courses that you can do at a runway. So I've only ever ridden the bike at relatively low speed in a figure of eight, and it was fantastic at that. It was incredibly easy to do so, which speaks volumes for how well the bike handles, I suppose. So you're right, I suppose. knowing how much now I've really enjoyed riding a naked bike, a sort of 600cc there or thereabouts, it's a very fair shout actually, and it's maybe one worth me considering.
The only other one I had in mind, and you mentioned that you had a VFR 750 previously.
Yes.
Would be the natural, the progression from that would be the VFR 800.
Yes, and again, we talked about my list beforehand, and that's certainly one that was there or thereabouts on the list. I would suggest, again, a bike. It's always had a fairly good reputation, I think, and familiar with it to a degree. I've ridden V4 Hondas, always liked that engine. So yeah, there is an intrigue. Do I think it would be as much fun as the Hornet?
That's the key. I think the VFR, I don't think many people would argue that in terms of a used bike at this end of the market, offers probably the best value for money because they haven't really gone up in price yet. Everything else seems to be going up in price. But the VFRs are still kind of holding that, between, I don't know, anywhere between 1,500 quid for a 750 right the way up to sort of 2.5, 3 for a nice VTEC. And they'll come with boxes and it'll come with panniers. And so it ticks every single box. It does everything for you, apart from it's not as much fun, possibly. It hasn't got that thrill about it.
And I just think the Hornet would.
I suppose the only thing now then is, do you get the naked one or do you get the one with a half fairing? Because there's a half faired Hornet, isn't there? 2Y?
I think the naked. And I think I mentioned this earlier, that not having the fairing, you could really feel the speed. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the danger, the real danger is, I find myself buying a Hornet and see out the rest of the winter and move into spring. And actually, I get to a place where I think, I don't really want to ride the Fireblade, I want to keep riding the Hornet.
You'd be chopping the Fireblade in for a CB1000R or something like that.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you for your time today. I hope you sound like you've got enough out of it to sort of go on and make a decision. But will you do us a favour and let us know what you end up with?
Absolutely, I will. Absolutely.
Super. Brilliant.
Yes.
Thanks so
And
much
thank
for
you.
coming
Thank you
along.
very much. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we are developing a bit of a common theme here where Simon and I and Superbike Factory are helping our BikeSocial members find their next bike-ish. We're not finding them their exact bike, but they certainly are leaving here with a better idea of where they want to be. And certainly with Mark's case, it looks like a Hornet is certainly high up his list. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed the show again. If you want to be a part of this process, then get in touch. The email address is enquiries@bikesocial.co.uk. We say thank you also to Pirelli for supporting us with this series. And don't forget that if you've got some opinions or ideas or what would you have chosen, Mark, put it in the comments section below. And to be part of the show, of course, you have to be a BikeSocial member. And to do that, you either have to insure your bike directly with Bennett's, in which case you get membership for free. Otherwise, it's £6 a month or £60 a year. And of course, that gives you access to well over 100 different rewards, discounts, benefits, competitions, and there's a whole plethora of brilliant things that we do with the British Superbike Championship, which Bennett's, of course, is the title sponsor. Thanks once again, and we'll see you for episode number 5. And with not much surprise, just 3 days later, Mark had bought himself a Honda Hornet. It's a 2003 model with 8,500 miles on the clock and 2 owners from new. So that makes it 4 out of 4 BikeSocial members who we've helped find their next bike. But are you next? All sorts of fantastic. The fellow who walked straight down there, knocked over a cup of coffee, all over the place, just carried on walking. Where can I go from?